to really be able to find the most magnificent, interesting guests. And every week that I've had somebody has been amazing. So today I am doing a show called Millennials versus Gen X. We are also going to be looking at skipping forward and skipping backwards in terms of how there's an influence on society through a group of people called a generation. I'm going to go into all the generations and how they play out and how they affect our consciousness. The show is about consciousness of society and consciousness moving forward. And I think that the generational aspect of that is huge. I think it really affects where we go with our thoughts, with our art, with our technology, with our marketing. Everything gets played out based on the group of people that are influential at the time. So today I'm going to be bringing on a millennial. We're not going to say how old the millennial is. Holly Duffy. I'm a Gen Xer. We're not going to say how old the Gen Xer is, but just know that we have different generations on screen today. Let me go back to telling you directly about the show, so we can just zero in on what's going on here. All right, let me go on, because what we have today is the millennial generation, and the millennial generation is kind of coming into their own. I would say that's the group that's 27, 28 to 32, 33, 34. And those people are really influencing society right now during Pluto and Capricorn, because they've come into their own. They're hitting the ground running. When you're 30s, you go through your Saturn return, and that's when there's a whole shift in growing up, taking responsibility, taking on the world, and we're seeing that. So let me just tell you guys really quickly before we get into our millennial expert here. And by the way, if you'd like to call in, if you'd like to talk to a real live Gen Xer, just call in. I'm a real live Gen Xer, and this is your opportunity to talk to a Gen Xer. You know, there's like no other person around you, but there's me. I mean, the Gen Xers are everywhere, as are the millennials. But Holly Duffy is an expert because she's been looking at this for a long time now, right? You got into the field of psychology because was this mostly the interest of yours that pulled you into that, or was it just a side thing?
It was a huge interest. Basically it became a side thing because I was a teacher before that, and I started noticing differences of younger children that were different than the ones I'd worked with a few years earlier at the same age. So I started noticing just differences as the years went by of kids in the same age group, and started going, what's going on?
What were the differences exactly? Was it like how they communicated? Was it how they approached each other? Because all kids are different.
Mm-hmm. I just started noticing more universal differences or phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, for instance, when I worked in preschools about 10 years ago, the 3 and 4-year-olds behaved a certain way that I'm more accustomed to. But this last year working with preschool age, they seemed much more advanced. They actually behaved a lot like teenagers. And even, I mean, they were wonderful, but there were a lot of manipulative elements that I had never noticed in children that age before.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how much of that is generational, and how much of that is just the technology influence, that they're exposed to things so much younger now than they would have been exposed to, a decade ago, because, and also where the media is going. But then again, that is what influences a generation. Actually, these are some of the things I wanted to tell everybody, and I wanted to tell you. So I did a little bit of research because I've been really interested in this for a long time. So the 3 key trends that shape a generation, there's 3 things apparently that are documented that have a lot to do with where we go as a society, is parenting, technology, and economics.
Mm-hmm.
So right there you would have technology, but however people are influenced as they're growing up through those formulative years, what is trending in terms of the philosophical ideas behind parenting at that time.
Mm-hmm.
What is trending technologically? What is trending in the economy? Like how what they're seeing their parents go through is really fascinating, and I think that gets absorbed into the consciousness of developing minds. So would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. Even a lot of research is showing that the eggs even change in a woman through her lifetime, and so what she experiences goes through to her eggs before they're born. Yeah,
wow.
Even back to the grandmother.
Right.
So that there can be immediate influences on the person.
Tell us about your training, because that's so, when you look at generational psychology, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
too.
It's a growing field of psychology too, what happens in the womb, for instance, and generationally. So I've just researched it more on the side and in school, and I also tend to get along with older people more than myself, and I started noticing, like, why am I connecting to, feel like I have more in common almost with Gen X, because I'm at the older years of Generation Y, or the Millennials.
So is there a clear delineation between Gen Y and also the Millennials, or because Gen Y is almost part of Gen X? It's like the part of Gen X that are now those people are now in their late 30s. They're technically still under the umbrella of Gen X, but they're the ones who had the crippling college tuitions.
More and the younger ones now too, especially.
Right. But like the initial Gen Xers, I mean, I don't want to age myself, but when I went to college, it was $8,000 a year, and now the same school's $40,000 a year.
Exactly.
So yeah, I know that some of the people at the end of my generation really had huge student debt by the time they got out, whereas I did not.
Okay. So do you know why the people in your generation had?
It was just later? I think it was just cheaper, and we didn't have the huge disparities between the prices of schools and the cost of living. I mean, it was all kind of part of the American dream back then, that these were all attainable, and you were kind of expected to go to college, expected that you would be able to buy a home, so those values, I think, that got set into stone in the 50s and 60s and 70s were still kind of playing out by the time I got to school, and I finished up in the 90s. So, it just started exploding very quickly after that.
Very quickly after that. I even noticed when I finished my bachelor's degree in 2006, right after that, tuitions just skyrocketed. And I was being pushed to take out student loans the whole time I was in school.
You were being pushed?
Pushed by school counselors. And I said no for a few years, but then I began saying, oh, I do need the money. I can't afford the cost of living. So I started taking out loans, but I had been pressured by school counselors and people in the financial aid offices to take out loans.
That's
quite
interesting.
A while. Yeah.
So there was less money to give. There was a scholarship maybe.
That happened.
And they also, maybe there was salary increase. I don't know.
I don't know where it's going.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The cost of textbooks.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting, but surprisingly, like you're saying, that was the dream back then. I think some people still believe in that dream. And so it's kind of a sobering reality to have gone through and finished higher degrees or higher education and then realize, wow, I really am not making that much more money. It really still is very difficult. So there are different aspects of that as well.
Actually, that is something very interesting to think about. Like, is the American dream still alive and well? And do we still have access to all the things that we thought we did and that our parents did?
Right, or is it just a dream?
Well, it wasn't just a dream for people like my parents, because they definitely attained everything that they were told that they would. It just became like, I don't know. But so let me go through, before we go into your background, how you decided to find schooling and what directions you're taking it. I do want to go into some research that I found, which I thought was really cool. So first of all, let's talk a little bit, for those of you who are not really clear on when one generation ended and another one started, I can give that to you. So basically, it's very important to know where one generation ends and another begins, and you look at the years, and that's how you can kind of cut it on, cut it off. So let's start with the millennials. So the millennials were born collectively between 1982 and 1992. Now there could be like a little bit of overlap on both ends, maybe 1980, some people will say, but really it's 1982 to 1992. Gen Xers are 65 to 76. So from 1965 onward to 1976, which means that there's this gray area between 76, 77, and 81, 82. And then the boomers, which were, we all know, the post-war generation, that was from 1946 to 64. And then that leads us to the traditionals, or the silent generation, which was 1945 and back, you know, and that was the generation, the traditionals. They are the ones that really got locked into their jobs. They got the gold watches. They stayed at their professions. They're probably at one job. I don't want to say professions, but they stayed at one job their entire life. They achieved the gold watch. They bought their homes for $25,000 to $40,000, paid those homes off, got to vacation by the time they were in their 80s, well, 60s, 50s. I don't know. They raised their kids when they were really young. So those are the traditionals, or the silent generation. They also didn't believe in therapy.
Interesting.
That was the generation that was completely not really, you know, children should be seen and not heard. They didn't want to talk about things in the past. That's why they're called the silent generation.
Interesting.
And then with the boomers from 46 to 64, they really came about, and they just kind of shattered the illusion that, and maybe that has to do with the death of the American dream as well, because they looked at what the traditionalists and the silent generation did, and they wanted no part of it. They were that was Berkeley in the 60s. That was the time when there were bra burnings going on. You know, they were revolutionizing everything. Women's lib, Betty Friedan, like all these movements started to break up the illusions of what the boomers had set, or what the traditionalists and the silent generation had set in stone.
Right.
Yes, and they started looking at therapy, looking at themselves. I think there was like a book, I'm Okay, You're Okay, and you know, all these kind of deep things started to, and that's progress. And then we have the Gen Xers. Most Gen Xers, like myself, were raised by traditionalists and silent generationals. So we were raised by people who didn't believe in therapy, didn't believe in self-empowerment in any way. So we were taught children should be seen and not heard. So the Gen Xers, now you have the grunge world.
Yes.
You have Kurt Cobain, you have Doc Martens, you have, you know, this whole generation of dysfunctional kids that were birthed from dysfunctional families that are trying to find a voice and get some distance from the silent generation and say, I'm not okay. This needs to be looked at.
Right.
And we all rebelled. You know, the ones that didn't have the cool parents, bless their heart, we all rebelled, and we all wanted to shake things up and not wash our hair and look grungy. You know? And then that leads us to the millennials, born 82 to 92, and how different they are. The millennials were raised by the boomers. So you can also see how there's a generational skip.
Yes.
Like, I was raised by a silent traditionalist.
Oh,
you were raised by a boomer.
Boomers.
So you can kind of see how that there's a pattern here.
Yes.
And because they say that maybe the millennials, I think they say the number one word that goes with millennials is they say that there's a certain amount of entitlement, and they think that that could be because boomers did not want their kids to struggle.
Yeah.
They wanted their kids to have a better life than they had. And it was also a very affluent time in those years. So the millennials were kind of handed things and didn't have to work as hard.
I don't know about that, but I can see that perspective.
Yeah, well, maybe like, and it's different case by case, but yeah, that's basically like my theory.
Yeah.
Which I didn't study psychology, but it's my collective theory.
Well, it's a huge part of it, I think, is this dialogue between generations. It's to dialogue, like, what do we think about each other's generation? Or what are maybe assumptions or generalizations, but maybe there's common themes that have serious meaning to them too.
Yeah. So tell us about, like, before I go more into like all the like little factual or the research that I did, tell me about, or tell them, and don't forget you can call in if you have if you want to speak to an authentic Gen Xer or an authentic millennial. We're here to represent the generations, and call us and ask us questions like, what does it feel like to be a Gen Xer? Like, I love that question. Sometimes I just ponder it, like, what does it feel to be like a Gen Xer?
Yeah.
So anyway, so tell us, like, what got you into psychology, and where do you want to take it? And
well, yeah, that's a good question. I guess it first began, funny that you mentioned parents not wanting their kids to go to counseling or therapy, but I ended up going as a child, and so that's what first led me to want to go into therapy. I had a male counselor when I was 7, and he helped me so much. And
but you weren't raised by a silent generation.
I was raised by baby boomers.
Yeah, I think they were like more cutting edge.
Yeah, so they did want therapy, but there was also trauma mixed in due to me needing to go to therapy.
Yeah.
So there's like the traumatic pieces, or people that have experienced different types of trauma.
Right.
But then being more open as baby boomer parents for therapy, which I think can be good or bad. There's definitely two sides to that. But I began going into counseling psychology because I'd wanted to do that for years, because I had different counselors growing up, which is interesting that you said that too, that millennial concept. So I had all these different counselors, but there were 2 that really helped me. So most of them were not helpful for me personally. So I kind of took those pieces and was like, well, how can I be helpful? And then I began teaching, and then I would run into school counselors and ask them questions. So I was teaching in Hawaii, and it was a huge learning experience working with all different ages of kids. So that's what sparked my interest in generations too, because I'd learned that these younger children, and I'm also the oldest of 8 kids.
Yes, that's amazing. So, I think that's so cool that you've got like she also has a very, very tight family.
Yes.
And I love your relationship with your mother, but that's because she's a boomer.
Yeah,
it'd be different if she was a different generation, trust me.
Right? I think so.
You guys are like friends, and she's like, it's a whole different thing.
It is.
She's like, blaze your own trail.
Yes.
Not like you have to do what we say and do what we did.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Like do that. But then there's 2 sides of that too, because then you can run into, like, in psychological terms, enmeshment. So for instance, if a child doesn't have enough healthy boundaries between a parent, that can also create issues. So it can be good either way. But.
I mean, is your mom a hippie? Because it's like the boomers and the booming generation they were a lot of hippies.
There are a lot of them.
Or hippies at heart.
At heart. She kind of is at heart. She's into a lot of natural healing and alternative medicine. So she's helped me a lot with that. But I wouldn't call her a hippie. She grew up in Eugene, Oregon. So huge hippie central, but didn't like a lot of the hippie stuff. So also, which plays into the religious context. Grew up Mormon. And so I think that Mormons tend to be more traditionalists. That's definitely a quality. So it's kind of a mix.
Yeah. But different types of traditionalists than the actual traditionalist generation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I could do a whole show on the whole Mormon thing is fascinating.
That's a whole other,
that's like another show. We'll have to have you back, and we'll talk about what it's like to grow up Mormon if you want.
That'd be great.
but yeah, it's so I'm sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, where was I? For counseling, and then I entered into a master's program for counseling. I had a bachelor's in social sciences, and then I entered a master's for counseling psychology in 2010. And I was actually went up there in Santa Barbara. And so I did that program for about 3 years, and then I started counseling 6 years ago. And I'm almost done with my hours. So I'm a registered MFT, or marriage family therapist intern, but I'm really close to finishing those 3,000 hours. And it's been very difficult.
How do you do 3,000 hours? Like, how many weeks and months is that?
Yeah, well, I've been doing it 6 years. So, but
is that how much everybody has to do?
Not always, but a lot of times, because one of the issues is, back before, this is a generational topic as well, I've met psychologists that when they were interns, say in the 80s and 90s, they would make like $25 an hour to start as an intern. What took place when, I guess at the same time I went to school to be a counselor, a lot of other people did as well. So a lot of the internships don't pay. And it's really hard to find an internship and be able to make money.
So how do people do that?
I've juggled like 2-3 jobs at a time.
Oh my God.
It's been taking years, but I love the work. So
do you think what shifted it? Do you think there's the field got saturated and they're trying, is that like a weeding out process, or
maybe both? Yeah, they've changed the exam structures as well. So I think it's a mix of weeding out. And also I've wondered if it's a way for maybe people that maybe have more money to be able to do it easier than someone that, say, can't work like 2-3 jobs and try to not get paid for interning. So I've noticed it's easier for people that have another intern or income source or have money. So I've wondered if that's a piece, but also generationally, why the ones before. And I've heard theories that it's because more women became counselors also is when the pay started to go down. So yeah, it was past like the late 90s when internships stopped paying.
We have a lot of people fighting for those issues.
There are a lot of people. There's actually
equal pay.
More organizations, even just for marriage family therapist interns to be paid.
Yeah, I mean, I believe I guess I could understand if you're talking something like, I have to do 500 hours.
Yeah.
I could see, okay, these are the 500 hours, you don't get paid, you've got to spread it out to make it work, and tough luck, do it however you can.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about something that's 3,000 hours, that is a long time to not work.
Long time.
And a long time to be supported by other people, or a long time to have to take out student loans to live off of.
Yes.
I mean, that's tough, and it puts you behind the 8 ball, I guess you would say. I mean, it puts you behind when you're trying to hit the ground running and you're trying to start.
Yeah, and you believe, because we weren't taught these things in school. That's another thing. The educational structure or format doesn't really teach you what happens when you graduate, or the business side of being a counselor.
Right.
And there's all different dynamics you don't even realize the whole time you're in school, and then you get out in the real world and you don't know really what to do or how to accomplish it. So hopefully people can be guided more or did
you do some research on the generational thing?
Yes, a lot. Actually, a couple years ago, I started looking into, because I would notice articles like in the grocery store, like saying things about millennials. And I studied Gen Y way back when it was called Gen Y. And I started going, oh, that's the generation I am, is Gen Y, back when I was like 16, like around the year 2000.
Right.
I think is when people started calling it Gen Y.
I remember Gen Y.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a Gen Y. I remember when it first came out. Because the information, we don't get the information until those people actually come into their own, because that's when they start influencing society.
Yeah.
Like now, like the children, like the kids that were born from like the 96 until 2001 and beyond, like my son, who was born 2003. I mean, that generation is being called Gen Z, or the Centennials, because they're going to kind of, by the time they're ready to come into their own, these are also people that are younger than 26.
Yeah.
And those are the people that were raised, like my son knows about the recession. My son knows about the political unrest. It's discussed at school. This generation, I think the kids that are in their like mid 20s and down, I think that generation that grew up with a bit of a struggle is going to come into their 30s, mid 30s, and I think they're going to create the most change.
Hopefully. But then again, what Gen Y or millennials experienced was this like pure I don't know, pure-hearted hope and dreams, and you can do it, and you live in the freest country in the world, and then everything just, I felt like as we became adults, just came crashing down.
Right.
So it was,
right.
It's been
there was
difficult.
an article in Time magazine, and I'm very, it's the only reason I'm laughing is because I'm like always like, don't, whenever I have a guest, I'm like, don't curse on the show. But anyway, it was an article about Gen Y, and they had renamed themselves Generation Fucked.
Yeah,
because they came out, again, these are people in their mid to late 30s who came out of college, and they had their student loans compared to people born just a little bit before them were enormous, and they came out in 2009, and there were no jobs.
Yes, exactly. So it was me.
They were competing with people in their 40s and 50s who had been laid off.
Yep.
The corporate jobs were outsourcing, and there were people coming. Technology was replacing jobs. Yes. And we had this massive restructuring within the corporations, so that all these people that had invested all this money into college, much more than I had to invest, came out, and suddenly it was hard for them to pay their loans back.
Oh, couldn't even, not even to begin paying loans back, hard enough just to pay for rent or food. Even with a degree, like I got my bachelor's degree in social sciences with a specialization in human resource management and personnel psychology. Plus, I had worked at the school in the HR department for the liberal arts department, human resources, and for 2 years. And I went out all over Portland, where I was living in 2006, before the year I was graduating the bachelor's, and could not even get a job. They were telling me I didn't have enough experience, and I couldn't get it.
But 2006 was still, that was still about 2 to 3 years before the recession.
Supposedly,
really hit.
But I sensed something coming with that, because I couldn't get a job. Literally, I was applying everywhere and just getting told place after place, you don't have enough experience. And I was like, well, why did all these adults tell me to go to college and get this degree, and that's what will land me these positions? Plus, I worked and I waited tables the whole time. So I felt like, well, why this isn't happening? And then I did end up landing an HR specialist position through a corporation in Hawaii about a year later, and that only paid $9 an hour, so I couldn't afford even doing that. So I was pretty, I don't know what the right word is, but disgruntled, or felt really let down. But I felt like that was all connected to what really hit harder a couple years later. But I had a good grasp on it, at least right before it happened.
Right.
For more people.
Yeah.
And then that's also the same year after that, right around 2006, 2008, that the tuitions even went up higher.
It's crazy.
So, yeah.
Because at the same time we had this impending recession.
Yeah.
Everything else was exploding.
Yeah.
It's really odd. It's kind of like this perfect storm, Murphy's Law. Isn't there some sort of a balance system put in for that?
Right? Isn't there like, what's the invisible hand doing?
Yeah, exactly. Like something that says, okay, if this is going up, then we're gonna, why should this go down? We need to like bring it both, closer to the center. So, and I think those things used to be in place. Like that's why I'm wondering if the American dream worked, because it seemed like there was more checks. Look, nobody wants to go back to the 50s. You look at the 50s and you're like, oh my God, from what people say, but it seems like there was more safety nets, or there was more checks and balances, or everything wasn't like a free for all.
Yeah.
They say now that corporations, like the head of corporations, are making like, I don't know, I think it's like $300 or $400 times more than they used to make in the 50s.
Wow. But then are the lower workers making less or about the same?
Well, they're making more because because things go up, but the disparity is so much wider. And by the way, I don't know if I'm right about the 300 to 400, but it's something insane.
That makes sense.
I can't remember if it's 500 or if it's one of the other two, but it's an insane amount of a difference between the CEOs, the corporate heads, and the people that are kind of the bigger the bigger groups that are working.
That are working. Well, I just noticed a disparity, or like, for instance, let's say cost of living just keeps going up, 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 but the income based on inflation doesn't seem to be nearly correlating with that. So.
It's an odd thing. It's an odd time that we're living in. And by the way, I want you all to know that we are not, I hope that this is not a depressing show.
Oh, yeah.
The Metaphysically Speaking is supposed to be a show about breaking out of the box. It's about connecting the dots, seeing what's underneath. And again, if we can see this, then maybe we can cure it, or maybe we can work towards making a difference. It's not about bringing anybody down. I definitely want your likes. I definitely want you to send me a heart. That's how I know that we're on the right track. Please don't get depressed. Please stay tuned. And by the way, Holly is a singer-songwriter. And she writes amazing, uplifting. I mean, I shouldn't even describe it like that. Her work, your work is hauntingly good.
Oh, thank you.
That's the only way I could describe it. It's absolutely, like, you wait till you guys hear, because we're gonna. However, like, bummed out you're getting that you're a Gen Yer, or that you were raised by a traditionalist, or seen and not heard silent generational, you are going to feel better by the end of this show, I promise.
Yay.
So I want to give a little bit more information about some of the things that I discovered when I did this little thing, when I started to really delve into this. So this is an interesting bit of information. So what they're saying is that millennials are the most consistent generation globally. And I thought that was so interesting. So whereas the Gen Xers, like, I may have been very different than the Gen Xers growing up in Germany.
Yeah.
Because in Germany, they were totally worried about the Cold War. And they were totally worried about being bombed. I mean, I don't know if this is true for other Gen Xers, but I was like listening to my tapes and shopping. I mean, I wasn't, but today, the reason the millennials are the most consistent generation globally, even more so than Gen Y, is because everybody has Facebook now.
Oh, interesting.
The technology has tweaked everything.
Yes.
And it has put everything on the same playing field if you are in a country that offers that. Mm-hmm. So it's created a through line where everybody's got the same mentality.
Yeah, but is that a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just it seems like we might be going more towards a one world reality. I mean, that might be far away, but I do know Pluto's going into Aquarius in 2024.
Wow.
And Aquarius, as humanitarian as it is, and remember, I don't know if any of you tuned into my Pluto in Capricorn show. I did a show on Pluto on Capricorn. You have to watch my shows. Are you following?
I need to watch. I was looking. Where are they? They're on.
I know they're
YouTube.
No, I'm moving these to YouTube. They are so. These shows are so hard to find. I am so grateful you're here and that you found me, because I'm always like, come see my show. And people are like, how do I find it? And you have to download the BitChat app, and it becomes a little more complicated. So we're always grateful for those who find us.
Yeah. That's great.
But we did do a Pluto and Capricorn show, and it's like just how we all have our own arcs in terms of astrological arcs in our own body, in our own consciousness. Like, I'm going through my own astrological chart from day to day, from year to year. I have my solar return done, or I try to, and I can see what's coming up for the following year, what trends are really predominant. The Earth is doing that too, because Pluto happens every 17 or 18 years. And when Pluto goes into a new sign, which it's in Capricorn right now.
Wow.
That's why they painted all these buildings gray, because Capricorn is a much more stoic, much more pessimistic. It's like I should just repeat my show. No, Pluto in Capricorn is a much more it's about corporations and governments and power struggles. Wow. Whereas think about Sag. We came out of Pluto in Sag, which was much more upbeat, much more Europe opened up, the internet opened up, because Sagittarius is a very open sign. It's a very optimistic sign. So prior to 2008, even though we had 9/11, things were bright and cheerful and happy, and everybody talked about abundance all the time.
Yeah.
And people spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
They ran up their credit cards, and the banks gave people houses that, you know, didn't, you know, just there was all this abundance and credit. So that was an interesting time. But when Pluto goes into Aquarius in 2024, we might have much more of a global consciousness, because Aquarius is a humanitarian sign that connects everybody on a worldly level.
Like the age of Aquarius.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yes.
More of the Pluto aspect.
Yes. Well, yeah, because Pluto's transformational. So it's shifting the consciousness of our planet.
Yeah.
So when Pluto goes into Aquarius, I think that makes sense, that the millennials and every generation moving forward is going to be more connected and more globally consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe that are the generations correlated with a lot of the astrology.
Yeah.
I wonder. Like,
that's what I wanted to know. I actually called Simon Kahn, I'm sorry, Richard Simon Kahn.
Okay.
He's the astrologer. He's been on the show 4 times.
Wow.
And he's the one who did the Pluto in Capricorn. We did a show on Mercury retrograde. A couple of weeks ago during the eclipse, he came and he did a show about the astrological aspects of the solar eclipse.
Ooh.
It was really great. And he also compared Hillary's chart to Trump's chart.
Yeah.
That was before the election. So anyway, but I meant to call him, and I said, I left him a message. I didn't reach him. I said, Richard, what was going on astrologically that gave birth to the consciousness of the millennials versus what was going on with my generation?
Yeah.
So I didn't get an answer. I'll have to. We should have had a 3-person show, because then we would have had like an actual millennial. He's a boomer. I'm a Gen Xer. All we needed is that 80-year-old silenter.
Yes.
Who probably wouldn't have said much.
I played music in senior homes a lot, so I could
my
go.
God.
Yeah. And
aren't they they're not like the most talky type, that generation.
No.
They're really like, that was also the Holocaust generation. Many of them never wanted to discuss the Holocaust if they had lived through it.
Yeah, they do seem more quiet, and some are talkative, but they're also put on a lot of psychotropic meds, which might contribute to that.
Are they
but
really?
That's a whole other story.
What are they put on?
One of the increasing things they're put on for Alzheimer's and dementia is Seroquel, which is also used for sleeplessness or insomnia and ADHD. And so Seroquel, I started noticing their doses were increasing, and they were not talking anymore like they used to a few months earlier.
This is fascinating. You're giving us like insider information.
It's huge. And the irony is I went to a talk by a naturopathic doctor who happened to bring up that coconut oil and rosemary cures Alzheimer's and dementia. It's a natural way. And he said they were upping the Seroquel, and it was a huge issue, actually creating more dementia within the clients in the senior homes. Then I went to the senior home the next day, and I heard the nurses talking about upping their doses of Seroquel. And on top of it, my neighbor the next day just randomly told me this information, that her father-in-law had dementia, but they gave him coconut oil every day, and when it started going away. So do
they ingest the coconut oil?
You can cook with it, ingest it, take spoonfuls of it.
Coconut oil, guys. Start now.
Brain. Helps.
Wow.
I guess helps. And rosemary as well. Rosemary tea or eating rosemary, smelling rosemary really helps with cognitive function.
Interesting. Holly, that's really interesting.
A little side note.
So anyway, in this case, it was the drugs that made them talk more or less. And I'm not saying that people that are traditionalists or in the silent generation, I'm not saying they don't talk. I mean, it's just what they choose to talk about.
Right.
I mean, they're not going to talk about, their childhood issues.
No.
They might talk about when they had a dance card and all the dates they had and all the men that wanted to marry them.
Yes, they would.
Or they might talk about, what's happening politically, because, but never really... Yeah, you
won't hear them like a baby boomer and a Gen X or Y talking about their childhood.
It's so funny. There's there is such a difference that that it's almost like different shades of colors.
Like a rainbow. Yeah.
So, Holly, you were telling me that even though first of all, we've been friends for a long time. I've known Holly, and I adore her, and we've had such a good time together. And I met her because she was actually house sitting for a neighbor. I don't know how I found you that first day, but we just was I like doing laundry? I have no idea.
We ran into each other back here, I think.
And we started talking, as you can tell. We started talking, and probably like 5 minutes turned into like 4 hours or something.
Yes.
I don't know.
And we felt like sisters right off the bat.
Yeah, we were talking so much, and we became like good friends. And the whole time she was here, we would like always hang out. But but you had told me even on the phone that you feel like you're not like you're. I mean, I know that you're Gen Y, but you were saying, I guess, how you connect more with Gen Xers and I wanted to hear about that. Like, how do you feel, even though you're so young, Holly, so you're really close to a millennial age.
And technically I'm a millennial. I'm like,
you're like you're like right on the cusp.
I'm right on the cusp, but as far as all things considered, or at least on the internet, like generation specialists, 1983 is the official start-off year of millennials, which I was born that year. And
but you were born closer to because you're August.
July.
Oh, July, right.
But still, a lot of people consider 79, 80, and those years to be Gen Y or millennials also. Some people consider anything from 79 or 80 to 2000 if you're born as a millennial.
Yeah.
So it's a big, like, 20-year gap for a lot of people talking about it. But anyway, so I'm kind of on the older end, but technically it's like, I'm closer in age to Gen X than, say, a 21-year-old millennial.
Right, but I don't consider there's like this. I think what they're talking about is the millennials that have really come of age. It's that the 21-year-old millennials, we can call them millennials, but they have not defined themselves yet. They're still going to be defining our society once they come into their own.
And
it's technically like really when those people of each generation go through their Saturn return. I think that's when it gets coined. From 28, so those people that have gone through their Saturn return from 27 and a half to 33, that's when they cross over, and that's when they defined the rest of society.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because the younger ones, and my youngest brother is 21. Yeah. And also a lot of the clients I'm working with right now are that age too. And so it's an interesting, there's differences but still similarities. So I do feel on the cusp with Gen X and Gen Y and even baby boomers. I've also met baby boomer age that I got along with more than a lot of people my age.
So how do you feel about people your age?
I'm a bit I kind of have mixed feelings about people my age. I get along with a lot of the ones that maybe are more maybe a year or two older even, that are more in the Gen X side. Yeah. Also. But people, and I get along with younger people, but people for some reason exactly my age, it's been a bit of a struggle connecting with.
Do you mean people that are like 28 to 34?
To 34, yeah.
So it's that millennial blob. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the connection I think I've struggled with. A lot of times maybe they seem distracted with technology a lot. And that's been difficult for me personally. I haven't gotten super into the technological thing. I kind of don't like it. A lot of things about it. I can see there's positive things about it, but I also would rather just kind of live my life and feel like I'm in the 90s or something.
Yeah.
So
I love the 90s.
Right?
The 90s were my favorite time.
They were so fun. Actually, my phone broke a couple weeks ago, so I didn't have a phone a couple days, and I felt so good. I woke up and I was like, wow, I feel like I felt in the 90s.
By the way, I used to like backpack through Europe, and I never had a phone. I didn't have a cell phone in my 20s because they weren't invented yet. Mm-hmm. And I used to backpack through Europe, and I mean, life was just like this cornucopia of mystery that would unfold in front of me moment to moment. Whether I was on a train talking to a stranger or stumbling into a youth hostel that I didn't know was there, 5 minutes ago, or seeing a sign that I'm supposed to go left instead of right. I mean, it was just this time. There's a good book called The Celestine Prophecy, which I actually want to go back and reread now. We've gotten so far away from that, but it was a time when your intuition connected on a moment-to-moment level with every single thing that you did.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. Yeah, it's organic. And you were kind of ahead of your time, because I've noticed it's been kind of a millennial popular thing to just hop off and travel, or kind of popularized. So you were doing that before.
I did it late. I did it at 27. I was like, oh, I'm so old to be backpacking through Europe. Everybody was like 20 after college at 23.
Oh, so you were doing that back then. I thought that was just a newer thing.
No, I was doing it when I was 27, and I was like the oldest person that I met when I was backpacking through Europe.
That's so awesome.
I was like, everybody was like 5 years younger than me, but I was like at the top of my field. I was like at the top of my generation. Like, I'm one of the older Gen X's, and I love Gen Xers. I love being in my generation, because I feel like we really bucked the system that our parents had, some of those, I hate to say this, but some of those toxic core beliefs that I was raised with, like children should be seen and not heard, and they think the world revolves around them. Well, you have to think that in order to go out there and meet your goals and do and pursue your dreams. So but I think that the generation that's coming up now, which will eventually be called Gen Z, or the Millennials, the ones that are 21 and younger, or 26 and younger, as they come up, those are the ones that it's going to be the 60s again. I mean, it's already starting.
It's interesting. That's another thing I've looked into, is the cycles. So, for instance, there's magazine articles now saying, the millennials, the lazy generation, or millennials, they're saying these kind of negative connotations while labeling people too at this, where are the labels coming from, I wonder. But if you proceed back into Gen X, almost identical article with the same cover on the magazine saying Gen X was lazy and wasn't.
Really?
Yes, but wearing wearing the same thing.
I could see why they would say that about Gen Xers. Gen Xers we have a terrific work ethic. But the thing about Gen Xers is, hey, I took for granted, I thought I would always be able to buy a house at any time as long as I could work, know. I lived in Europe, so I wasn't we weren't like the boomers. See, the boomers could hit the ground running in their 40s, and they could come out of college and buy a home.
Oh, yeah.
Even though they were different than the silent generation, they were a generation that put their nose to the grindstone.
Yeah.
They made a crap load of money, and Gen Xers looked at that and said, we can do that when we're ready.
Interesting.
So it was a different type of laziness, whereas the millennials, the ones that are 20, I'm sorry, I hope I'm not insulting anybody if there's a 29-year-old, 30 person, please call in and refute it. But anyway, that generation, they're saying, is entitled. It's a different type of laziness.
Yes.
Whereas the Gen Xers were soul searching, so they were maybe lazy because they wanted to discover. They wanted to be artists. They wanted to buck the system. They wanted to find themselves. They were on the hero's journey or the vision quest.
Yeah. Yes. Well, same with baby boomers though too.
Baby
in
boomers.
The 60s.
Oh yes.
And in the 70s.
Yes. The baby
kind
boomers.
Similar.
Yeah, they were all trying to shift everything, but the Gen Xers, for the most part, I mean, at least with me, I was like, oh my God, my dad has been working at this. My dad graduated from college on a Friday and started working on a Monday, and he stayed there for, I think, 35 or 38 years.
Wow.
40 years. He retired in his late 50s. He got the gold watch.
Wow.
He just was at the same job. And I remember, I mean, my parents are still alive, bless his heart, but he would mark off on a calendar every day in that last year because he could not wait to get out of there.
Yeah.
So I think I don't want to run out of time.
Yeah.
And I want you guys to see Holly to see her work as a singer-songwriter.
Oh yes, that work.
Yes. So maybe.
So should I play a song?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you should play a song. I mean, I think it would be so amazing to end with a lovely world, because it's just such a beautiful antidote to everything that we envision getting better.
Exactly.
But I mean,
that's why I wrote it.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, what do you want to play?
I would play that one. That's the theme song. It's everyone's favorite.
All right.
And that's funny because that song came when I was in Hawaii. I was feeling really sad about the state of everything, and I wanted to feel grateful for something, and then this song came. So
and it just came. I'm sure it just came to you from the ethers, because it is that powerful.
Oh, thank you.
So, all right, guys, you have to know this is worth a few hearts and a few thumbs up. I keep telling them that. But yeah, please, Holly Duffy.
Thank you, Madison. And you can sing along, or
I want my tambourine. Can I go get my tambourine?
Yeah.
All right, start. Just do your thing. Hey guys, don't go away. Words, but
you can do back up, and then there's a little sing along section.
All right, cool.
Hey,
all right,
here we go. I woke up and I looked outside. I saw a mountain so very high. I felt the breeze, and then I smiled. I said to myself, what a lovely world, a lovely world, a lovely place, a lovely planet, floating in space. So we're told. I walked outside and I looked around. I heard the birds such a lovely sound. I followed a winding path. I was so happy, I just had to laugh. A lovely world, a lovely place, a lovely planet, spinning in space. Do, 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 sing along. Do, 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 do. I skipped along a golden shore. I'll turn it to we. We watched the sun go down some more. We closed our eyes and we went to sleep. We dreamt of all the
lovely things, a lovely world, a lovely place, a lovely planet, swirling you say, so everyone in the human race, please take care of each other and this lovely place, a lovely world. Oh, thank you. I find that it's such a simple song, but it's so touching and it says so much and it's so optimistic.
Yeah.
I forgot some of the words, but thank you for letting me sing along.
Thank you.
We
That
have
was
an audience.
beautiful.
Hi.
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 Oh,
Do you want to come be on our podcast? No. Anyway, we did
So
have a little girl
cute.
back there with a flower. See how it brought people together?
Yes.
So, hey guys, thanks again for joining us for this lovely episode of Metaphysically Speaking with me, Mystic Madison, and Holly Duffy, the Gen Xer and the Millennial who brought you a song.
Thank you.
So thank you again for coming, and I hope to see you all another week here. Okay, God bless.